All right, so we got this going here. I'm going to give some time for everyone to get in here in the chat. And while I also am doing this, let's go ahead and bring the Twitch chat open on my other monitor here. Let's go ahead and go ahead and back to present. No spoilers, no. All right, there we go. All right, I'm going to officially start the seminar here in like 3 minutes. Just give some time for everyone to flood in that plans on showing. Gotta edit the title too. How are you guys doing today? Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna go a little bit over what's gonna be going on um, with the seminar in particular. So as you guys know, it's going to be a seminar about building your champion pool. We're gonna cover a couple of topics that are surrounding champion pool. Ideally, like what I would like to set up here is have you guys have some kind of strong idea of understanding like how you're going to build your champion pool and like why you're going to be picking certain champions. Um, and yeah, unfortunately, the world schedule has always been constantly being a problem, and the reason why it's right now is mainly just because it's not extremely late for Europeans. It is pretty late, but it also is a fine time for North America on a weekday. And Thursdays I found work best for seminars. So it sucks that it is during Worlds, but honestly, this seminar isn't going to be like probably more than 30 minutes. So luckily, you guys can not miss too much of Worlds if that's what you're up to. Um, right. So with that being said, I'm going to go over a little bit of just a couple things before we officially start. First things first is with my students, I have a Discord community where I've created like a productive environment for people to chat about League and also help each other improve, kind of similar to like what you would see as like Reddit Summoner School, but just more moderated and also more interactive with my like as an example with me. So in general, if any of you guys are interested in joining that Discord, we are allowing non-students to join now. So if you are interested, just stick around till after the seminar, and I'm going to post a link to join the Discord. Actually, I'm going to post my Discord link, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit before joining. I'm being really strict with this Discord. I want to know every member inside that Discord, and we're going to be strictly regulating it to ensure that there's nothing silly going on, and we're expecting everyone to follow the rules like extremely seriously. Now, on top of that, if you're interested in free coaching, on the seminar there's a survey link. If you go to Law Coaching where you signed up for the seminar, there's a survey link to get free coaching. I'm offering free coaching to 2 people a month based on a few things. So if you haven't checked that out, I definitely suggest checking that out. Now, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and officially start this seminar. Give enough time for everyone to jump in here. Also, if you guys have any questions during the seminar about what I'm covering, just hold it until the end of the seminar. Like I said, it's going to be pretty short, and at the end, I'm going to hold some time open just to ask any questions about Champion Pool and so on. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and officially start this. Okay, so obviously, this seminar is about building your Champion Pool. So, moving forward here, these are going to be the discussion points I'm going to be talking about during this seminar. The first thing is building the ideal champion pool. We're going to spend a fair amount of time just discussing this. The next thing is understanding flavor of the month champions and what it means for your champion pool. The next would be dealing with meta shifts and balance changes. So let's say like your champion pool gets nerfed or something of that nature, or your main champion gets nerfed. I'm going to talk about what you can do about that, depending on a couple of factors. The next thing is playing off meta champions for all you Urgot top players, or whatever you like to play that just isn't seen as like in the meta game. I'm going to discuss the idea of playing off meta champions because there's a lot of people that like that, and that's definitely a point I want to cover. And then the final thing is there'll be a slide that says questions, and that's when you guys can flood me with all the questions that you guys have. So getting started here. Right. So your ideal champion pool. From what I discovered through extensive testing with a lot of my students over the years, and also just case studies in general with lots of players, by all means, the strongest type of champion pool to build is 3 champions. Um, and then the way I break down these 3 champions is having a main champion that you primarily play. I would say in most games. However, you'd have two backup champions for certain reasons. So an example I use is if you're a jungle player and you have like your primary champion, which let's say Zach. I'm mentioning Zach because he's really meta right now, and a lot of people are playing him. And this is like something I've seen with a lot of my students that play Zach. This is like kind of what their champion pool looks like and what they should look like, and what I help them like meld and form into. So first champion, Zach primary. It's the tanky engage jungler that has decent gank pressure. Okay, great. That's a great primary champion. But there's a reason why you definitely have two backups. One, you should have a backup in a similar playstyle as that champion. That in case like you really need to play that champion, but it's banned or picked away. So you want a pick that still performs like your general playstyle that you're comfortable with, but it also it also could be picked against it. And of course, Amumu is not a terrible pick into Zach. It's okay. So having a pick that is a backup to your main pick that has a similar play style that generally performs the same thing, so you're not forcing yourself into an entirely different play style, is really good. But then having one pocket pick as a backup is extremely important. As an example, let's say that you want to play Zach this game, but your last pick, your top laner is playing a heavy engaged top laner already, and then your support's playing heavy engaged, and your team honestly is lacking damage. Picking Zach wouldn't be the best. You could, and you could possibly win, but picking a more of like a less of a tanky engaged champion would probably be better for your team. So getting some kind of damage somewhere. And as an example, Graves would be a fine pocket pick. He's not someone that like if you have tons of engaged, Graves is a great pick. He does tons of damage. So if you lack damage, that's a good pick. And that's just an example. Another example I'll use in terms of laning, because there's maybe some laners out there. Now I agree that there is a couple of different intricacies based on laning phase. So an example I would use for laning phase would be, let's say that your main pick is, let's say, Ari. Okay, so Ari is a great champion for a main pick, mainly because she's very flexible. She can fit pretty much everything into this kind of into kind of like any game. But there's some reasons why you wouldn't want to pick Ari, which the biggest one that a lot of people would argue here is a counter pick. So I'm highly against the word counter pick. I don't think necessarily that counter picks are something that exist extremely like really just right up there bold and up front. I think there are some extremely difficult matchups, but in terms of counter picks and whatnot, having a backup pick for that would be in particular pretty good. So as an example, Ari has really big difficulties laning against Annie, and that's like a well-known matchup that is a problem for and like Ari in particular. So having a backup champion, so as an example, if the enemy team picks Annie, your pocket pick could be a pick that performs well against Annie, as an example. So as an example, a champion that typically performs pretty well against Annie would be like Syndra, or something of that nature that can one-shot Annie before Annie can one-shot them. So by all means, that is something definitely um, to discuss in terms of laning phase, and like laning in general is having one main champion that is pretty flexible or fits your playstyle really, but then having one backup that fits that playstyle. So as an example, if Ari gets picked away or banned, you could pick a champion like one. Syndra is extremely good against Ari too, so that's a good pocket pick to have. And then having a champion that fits a similar playstyle as Ari around that kind of control mage with a little bit of CC could be another good pick for a backup in your ideal champion pool. So again, just going back over it, you really want one like main champion that you really put a lot of time onto, but then having two backups just in case the champion gets picked or banned, or you get picked into a difficult matchup and you'd rather play another one of those champions that you have back on your like roster sitting back. But any more than three champions becomes a bit difficult, especially for players like I would say below platinum. And even then it's like there's some platinum players that like it depends on how long you've been playing and how much you've experienced different champions, but hands down, even as someone like myself that when I play, I've been playing league for over 6.5 years, I still try to limit myself to like a 3 champion pool in each lane that I play to really work on that. I see some questions coming into the chat. Hold your questions until after the seminar is over. The seminar isn't going to last too long, so when it's over, I'll answer any questions that you guys have about champion pool and anything else as well. All right, so the next topic to talk about is flavor of the month champions. This is really big. A lot of my students, a lot of people in general ask about flavor of the month champions, and sometimes they don't fully understand what flavor of the month champions are, so the first thing I'm going to do is identify those champions. Flavor of the month champions pretty much mean a champion that really comes in heavy during the metagame just due to some balance changes or a newfound build that was discovered. As an example, like Jace and Zac are big flavor of the month champions, as well as Kennen. Like, so those three champions I say are like the top bottom champions right now. And a lot of my students will ask, or people in general would ask, should I main this champion? Like, should I spend time learning this flavor of the month champion? And the honest answer is, if they do not fit your playstyle, no. Typically, it's just not a good idea. Especially if you're someone that is going to take a long time to pick up a champion. Likely, most of these champions are going to be receiving nerfs in the near future. So by all means, um, it's not worth to have some huge time investment on a champion that's probably going to be changed in the near future. And only if they fit into your playstyle and you can adapt to that champion quickly is when I would suggest you could pick up the flavor of the month champion. Now the next thing is, how do I deal with playing against such strong champions? Flavor of the month champions come into big popularity mainly due to the fact that they are extremely strong in the current metagame, whether it's just balance wise, like itemization wise, or even just counter meta. Like, they're just extremely strong against the current metagame. So, as an example, let's just use Jace. Jace right now, he didn't receive any huge buffs. He received like an okay buff, but the thing is that a new itemization choice that was like the tier list Jace build has really came and brought him into the metagame extremely strong, to the point where he's also extremely strong against most like meta champions right now. Like, a lot of champions, especially like to just avoid itemizing like a lot of resists right now. Like, as an example, like a really meta thing right now to do on Gnar is to go Black Cleaver into Frozen Mallet, or Frozen Mallet into Black Cleaver, depending on the matchup. There's no armor inside that build. In Jace, you build full armor penetration, so you're doing true damage to champions. Even if they have a bunch of HP, you're going to melt them. And that's why, a champion like Jace is really good. Another thing is Zhonya's has fallen out of the metagame. Zhonya's is not that big of an item. So once again, AP champions typically aren't building armor, so Jace does a lot of damage. And this applies to other champions too. Like, Kennen's kind of swept into the meta because team fights are really big and important. And as an example, as well as Protobelt being like a really good item on Kennen as well, it's kind of pushed him into like this huge power spot in general as well. Syndra is another flavor of the month champion. There's a lot actually right now during like this area of the month due to like the recent balance changes. And this question is a really important one to answer. It's not that easy either. It entirely depends on what like role you're playing also. But you ask yourself, like, how do I deal with flavor of the month champions? First things first, if let's say you're a mid laner and your main champions are straight up like countered by a flavor of the month champion like Syndra, or just are a really difficult matchup for you, ban Syndra. Tell your team to ban Syndra. Like, it's simple as that. That's something that's been happening a lot in higher elo right now that isn't happening lower elo, is these flavor of the month champions aren't being dealt with correctly. Like, either the champions aren't being banned or they're not being playing around correctly. So there's a lot of players that are picking up these champions because they fit in their general champion pool, and it's causing a lot of problems. Like, a lot of people are having difficulties adapting to the current flavor of the month champions. This champion is just extremely broken, and I don't fully understand how to deal with this. And it comes down to either banning it, and if you're forced to play against it, you have to change your playstyle to deal with this champion. Like, against Syndra, you're probably going to have to build a Negatron cloak early if you're playing like a mage that cannot deal with Syndra, as an example. Also, an idea would be is, let's say that you have your champion pool of 3 champions. Look at your champion pool. Sometimes switching up your champion pool, switching off to one of your off picks to deal with that is in general a kind of big problem to deal with. It's like, let's say if you're an Ahri player that really enjoys playing Ahri, but Syndra is becoming a really big problem for you as Ahri. Sometimes switching up your pool to deal with the current flavor of the month champions is best, and then you can always switch back depending on what's going on when the meta shifts back. Because of course, like, flavor of the month champions are called flavor of the month because they typically fall off around a month once the balance rotation works out. Once Riot kind of nerfs a couple of these champions that are in really big strong spots, they fall off, and that's why picking up these flavor of the month champions isn't always the best choice. All right, so let's move forward here. All right, so meta balance shift discussion. This is of course important too, because a lot of players deal with this all the time, especially in lower elo, because a lot of players in the lower elo enjoy following the metagame. They really want to always be playing what the pros are playing, or be trying to master champions, and hopefully after the previous things, the people that are watching this kind of take my advice and don't hop on like the flavor of the month hype train, because by all means, as a lower elo player, it's harder to adapt to champions faster. It takes more time, and by the time you may be proficient on that champion, they're getting nerfed. But let's say that you fall in love with one of these champions that are flavor of the month, like let's say Zac. A lot of players have realized how good Zac is, not only because of how OP like Zach is currently in the game, but also they just love his playstyle. So let's say you just want to stick with it even after like the FODM is gone. Um, Adapting to balance change is really important. And the biggest thing to do is look at what got changed. Look at what got changed. Understand like what has changed, because the biggest thing is failing to adapt is the reason why that people fall off on champions and they totally quit them in general. So let's say Zach gets a nerf. Like maybe Zach's E gets like his max range gets nerfed over a couple of levels. So maybe not until like maybe he loses like a little bit of range on his E. Adapting to like your new gank spots and how that like changes your ganks is really important. And maybe another thing is his E damage gets nerfed. Those are kind of nerfs I see coming. Is what I'm saying. Is Zac does too much damage for what he like provides. He's already really strong and sustained in the jungle. I don't think Riot's going to change that. His engage is really strong, so maybe nerfing like the range of his E is a fair change, and then really reducing the damage that Zac does without building any damage is another really important area. So adapting to like the numbers, reading the numbers, and understanding what that means is a really big way of adapting to what the nerfs do. Now another thing is outside of balance changes is meta shifts. Meta shift is really important to talk about as well. Let's say as an example, you're a Zac player and Zac gets nerfed and a lot of other champions get nerfed, and all of a sudden like no longer are tanky engaged junglers even in the metagame or considered to be in the metagame anymore. What does this mean for you as a tanky engaged jungler? Well, it depends. So as an example, maybe tanky engaged junglers fall off because there's a lot of better choices, and then top laners and supports move back from the range supports and from the the carry top laners to the more of tanky engage again. So as a jungler, this is the worst case scenario, because if you play a tanky engaged jungler or you main one and your team already has tons of it, you're going to be hurting your team by forcing your team to have another tanky engaged jungler on your team. And that's when you're kind of like really pigeonholed into switching your champion. But if the meta shifts in a way that tanky engaged junglers are still weak, but they're still like lacking a lot of tanky engaged champions, it's still okay to play that. You just got to adapt to it and understand that you are going to be weaker. So as an example, if like extremely aggressive junglers come into the metagame where it's like assassins like crazy, you're going to have to adapt. Start warding your jungle so you don't get picked off when you're clearing your jungle. Like, take the extra step to adapt correctly. Now, the biggest thing I want to talk about as well with meta shifts and balance changes and champion pool is the most important thing to look at um, overall as like in terms of statistics is your win rate. Look at your win rate and your KDA. And I'm not talking about having lots of kills, but your KDA over your kill, death, and assist ratio. If you look at like na.op.gg as an example, the site I use for statistics, you can look at your general statistics and see like, okay, how are my numbers looking and are they good? Also, win rate always matters as well. You could have high KDAs, but you're losing games. There's only so much you can call unlucky, and from there, it's more about I'm not doing something right, or it's just I'm not fitting into the meta right now, and possibly a change is necessary. So, as an example, if you're playing like you're sticking with a champion like Zac, but you keep getting invaded on, you're dying, like this never happened before, you need to either try to adapt or switch, which is, following the balance shift and also the metagame shift. I don't think it's always necessary to be part of the meta and stick to it, but it's important you adapt to it. So there are players, as an example, that are one tricks that have been playing the same champion for a very long time. They have to do things to adapt to the meta. A perfect example of this is Shaco one tricks. I know a lot of Shaco one tricks in high elo, mainly due to the fact that I guess they eventually climb. But there's times where in the metagame, there's AP Shaco has been better than attack damage, as an example, and they switched over, they adapted to the meta. Also, they stopped invading recently. Um, so it's like, switching up and just really looking at your win rates and adapting your play style according to what is going on in the current metagame is really important. All right, so next thing here, last but not least, playing off meta champions. Okay, so playing off meta champions is totally fine. I've coached a lot and worked with a lot of players that have been playing like off meta champions, and generally there has been very few where I'm like, okay, this is really not working. But it's all about learning your place in the metagame on this champion and understanding what you need to be doing to actually play towards what your team needs as this champion. So as an example, let's just say you're playing like Quintop. I think Quintop's a good one because that's a somewhat popular off-meta champion that is consistently played through a lot of Ela ranges. You need to realize like when you play Quintop, like what is your goal? Like, are you going to be pushing and roaming? What summoner spells are you going to be taking? Like, how do you have to build? When is it a good pick, or is it always a good pick to play Quintop? And understanding like in general like what you need to be achieving on this champion, because playing off meta champions totally fine. The only thing you need to be really focusing on is like getting a strong sample size of win rate. So get like like around 30 to 40 games, look at your KDA, look at your win rate, and ask yourself, like, reflect. Okay, what does this mean for me? If like I should continue playing this champion, what's important to me? Is climbing important to me? If not, then and you just want to keep improving and get a larger and larger sample size until maybe you actually break that 50% win rate, by all means, that's totally fine. But it's going to take time, and also when you realize that if you're playing off meta champions, you typically have to be going the extra mile to make it work because you have a lot of things against yourself when you play off meta champions. Like your teammates aren't going to understand how to play with you just as much as the enemy team may not know how to play against you. So there's a lot of things you have to like kind of go the extra mile to make work because maybe your team won't play together with you correctly when you're playing a champion like this. So it's important to consider that and deal with that in general. And again, the final thing that really only matters when it's coming down to this is the raw numbers. So let's say that even though you may have rough games, if you're still winning them, they may be rough, but you're winning. A good example is this. I know a Cyan top one trick player. I'm not friends with him. I just know him from solo queue, where he has like 950 games on Cyan top. And this guy's KDA is garbage. Like he averages like 2 kills, 8 deaths, and like 10 assists a game. Like that's his actual average. But his win rate's 57%. That's insane. Like the fact that his KD is that low, but his win rate's that high, and it shows that champion's working. And over that many games, 57% win rate over like 800 games. I don't know how he's not challenger yet. He's like Diamond 2 or Diamond 1, and just means that he's climbed really far from where he's come from playing that champion, which is why his win rate's high with so many numbers, and he's still like not extremely high ranking. Well, that's a perfect example of like why win rate matters. Just because KDA doesn't matter, just because you don't win lane, it doesn't matter. It comes down to you winning those games or not. If you play a certain champion, you get destroyed in lane, but you make up for it in other ways in the game. That's really good. I'm guessing he really shines through like engaging later on into the game and making the right ganks, despite him like feeding in lane almost every game from what I've seen. Um, that really matters a lot. All right, so now moving forward, this is the questions area. So in general, kind of covered the main points right now of everything about champion pool. Like I said before, this isn't going to be an extremely long seminar. I know you guys are like at Rise right now trying to watch Worlds, so by all means, ask any questions that you have about champion pool in general. And then once we finish the champion pool questions, if there's any, we'll move on to any general questions. So as of now, feel free to ask any questions that you guys may have. I'm a Rek'Sai main who also has Lee Sin, Sejuani, and Kha'Zix in my pool. Is this a strong champion pool for the jungle? Yeah, I love that champion pool. Actually, that's looking a lot like my champion pool in some ways. So Rek'Sai main, perfect. I like Rek'Sai. Okay, Rek'Sai's banned or picked. What does this mean for me? Lee Sin fits Rek'Sai in a very similar way. Like it. Then maybe you ask yourself, okay, maybe I need a more reliable and stronger engage for team fights. Sejuani, perfect. That's a good pocket pick. And then Kha'Zix is once again a really good champion. He's pretty strong in the current metagame, and he fits that assassin type role. So let's say that you have a really tanky team with a really good engage. You could follow up that with a Kha'Zix, and it works well. So overall, champion pool fits perfectly. Would Trundle, Alawi, and Cho'Gath be a decent top lane champion pool? I'm trying to account for split pusher, bruiser, and an AP tank. Yeah, I mean, I really like Trundle and Alawi. The only thing I'd suggest is Cho'Gath's a pretty weak champion right now in the current metagame. I understand he maybe feels somewhat strong in your current Ela range, but there's a lot of reasons why he, in general, isn't that strong of a pick. I would reconsider your AP top laner, because as Cho'Gath typically isn't even played that much of an AP tank, he's more typically played as like a CC tank, even though he does ability powered, magic damage. It's kind of considered. So if you want like a tanky AP top laner, there's a couple better choices. Even like Kennen. Kennen isn't seen as like a mega tank, but you build him somewhat tanky, he does a lot of damage. Even when he gets nerfed, I still like he's still not going to fall completely out of the metagame. There's a couple other like tanky AP top laner type champions that would be better than Cho'Gath. I'm trying to think about some, and for some reason it's not really clicking on top of my head. Like Vlad is another one, a really tanky AP type champion. You could even build him like full tank and still be good. So yeah, the only like really weak spot I see right now in your general champion pool would be Cho'Gath. What would you recommend when playing in mid-high plat? I play Trundle straight for plat 2 and 3. I'm assuming that is top lane Trundle, and I mean Trundle's fine. You can play Trundle all the way to Challenger if you want. Um, he's a very flexible champion. He fits into most matchups. He doesn't really have that many bad ones, and he's really consistent. And that's why I like Trundle. He's a really consistent champion. He plays most of his matchups pretty like close to how you typically play like all the other matchups. He fits in most compositions, as I said, and you could build either really tanky or a bit damagey on him. So he's really flexible. So by all means, Trundle as a top laner is fine. In terms of like adapting your pool and building a couple more champions, it's hard to say exactly what generally fits your play style of what would be good pickups. But yeah. Um, Now, when is it good to use Blitzcrank over Thresh or Thresh over Blitzcrank? That's a that's a good question. So typically Blitzcrank's really good against mobile teams, but then again, so is Thresh. The only difference with Blitz is that his hooks are a bit more impactful than Thresh's in terms of like late game picks in team fights. So I would look at it as, does your team composition like do we like Blitz's silence is also something not to be ignored. So if the enemy team is really weak to disruption, Blitz is always a better pick. Um, but I would say that Blitz is more like, I land my grab, great, I'm useful. But as Thresh, you have a couple more options for peeling for your AD carry and whatnot. So I would really consider I would consider picking Blitz in team fight like games where like disruption is important, where silence is really good, like channeling ultimates like Malzahar, Katarina, stuff like that. Blitz is really good. Thresh is more about like when your AD carry really needs peel from assassins and whatnot. I would pick Thresh. Another question: I'm a plat Wukong main in the jungle. Who should I pick as my secondary and pocket picks? I love Wukong in general. My win rate on him is pretty high. Um, and someone that does play Wukong jungle in terms of a secondary pick, um, if it depends. Like, it depends on how much other champions you play, because Wukong is a very like a champion in terms of his micro game and mechanics that he needs isn't extremely high. So it depends on like how much you have in terms of like skill, like in how confident yourself in picking up other champions. But a really strong other two picks would be, I would consider Elise, Wukong, and then like Rek'Sai. So like Rek'Sai, if you don't like want to play Wukong for whatever reason, similar play style, really strong level 3 ganks, and also scales pretty well. Um, and then Elise is a good pocket pick. Still has those early gank playstyles that you enjoy, while also being the AP damage. All right, next question. My secondary role is top lane. I try to play Darius, Trundle, and Kennen, and Pantheon when I'm top. Yeah, good top lane pool. I'd remove Pantheon from it just because Pantheon can be a good top laner, but he's very like not good in the current metagame. Ask yourself, will Pantheon do good against Darius, Trundle, and Kennen? No way. So that's the only problem with Pantheon, I'd say. Okay, next question. I'm a top lane main, mid lane as my secondary. My top lane pool, I guess, would be Alawi, Gnar, and Yasuo with Vlad as AP damage. My mid lanes would be Vlad, Zed, and Fizz. I want to include New York into top lane pool. Can I manage that? Yeah, I would remove Yasuo um, from your top lane pool and add York, just because Yasuo is, in general, pretty weak right now. He's also going to be receiving more nerfs. So in terms of practicing him, he takes a lot of practice, and he's just going to be falling off harder and harder. So switching York in there would be good. I think York would be a good like alternative pick to Alawi, because they both kind of generally achieve the same thing. And then having Gnar for engage and Vlad's AP damage would be good. And then mid lane, your mid lane pool looks pretty good. Two assassins, an AD, an AP assassin, then backup mage if you feel like you can't play an assassin that game. I think that's totally fine. Next one, as an ADC main, my champion pool is Twitch, Vayne, and Ezreal. How does that sound? Yeah, I think that's pretty safe. You have two pretty very like weak laners like Twitch and Vayne that are really susceptible, and then you have Ezreal, which is a pretty strong laner. So I think that works. Like you could play Twitch or Vayne depending on comps, and then if you're like, okay, that's a really rough lane. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to play these champions into like a Draven or something. You can pick Ezreal and farm safely and scale. So I like that. Or I'm going to Victor Talon. How's that? I like it. Talon's a little bit weak in the current metagame, but he's okay as an AD assassin. It also depends on like how proficient you are in Talon, because there are some really good Talon players. As an example, I'm friends with what Wall Skill determines to be the best Talon in the world, and he plays Talon only. He climbs between Diamond and the Challenger tier consistently. So by all means, Talon can work. It's just you need a lot of like practice and skill on him. But Orion Victor I love right now in the current metagame for sure, and Talon is like, if it depends on why you would pick Talon, which is kind of important. I guess the biggest consideration to take in was like, is the mid laner a really weak laner that I can actually make picks on? That's something you consider to pick Talon over those champions. Now, next question: would you recommend using Singed in High Bronze Silver? I was considering it as a change from Cho, but the concept of proxy farming makes me kind of uncomfortable. No way, don't play Singed. Since it's such a unique playstyle that you need to learn by by the scientist. You have to spam so many games on him to really get a good grasp, a lot of studying and knowledge, and he's so different from every champion. So I would not consider Singe as like a good champion to pick up, especially if the idea of proxying farming makes you uncomfortable. it takes a certain like a special type of person to play Singed because you have to be okay with dying and having your team rage at you the whole game, even though that's the right thing to do. Who do you think the strongest mid lane picks in the metagame are right now? I'm trying to grow my champion pool. Okay, right now, straight up the strongest pick right now in mid game is Syndra. Mid lane, not mid game. She's like the most meta right now. She's flavor of the month. She's really strong. But there are a couple other champions that are pretty good. As an example, another really good champion right now is Orianna. Um, there's so many mid lane champions really that could work. Victor's strong right now. Most mid laners are pretty good right now. The biggest thing is trying to like instead of trying to identify and like pick a champion pool, um, really look at your playstyle and look who fits your playstyle and pick up champions and just give yourself a good reason to even pick up more champions. So just ask yourself, what is the reason I'm trying to pick up more champions? And then from there, ask yourself, okay, what fits my playstyle and what kind of pocket pick do I need to complement my playstyle? So if a champion that's picked that's strong against my playstyle is picked, I have something to deal with it. I only play well with Zed in Gold 2. I just feel like no one else fits my playstyle. Who else should I try? Or should I one trick? That's a good question. Zed. Well, I mean, Zed's playstyle, there's a couple of champions that somewhat fit it. Fizz would be one of them. If you're really like trying to assassin though, like Zed is a unique pocket pick in a way, so the only real adaptation I would have is maybe Fizz, just because like having a full AD team with Zed may not be the best, and then having Fizz in there would kind of fit. One tricking Zed isn't that bad because Zed's never banned anymore, so it could work. I feel like I would say it's okay to one trick Zed at this moment, but having a backup for maybe like when you have a full AD team against some tanks, like a champion like Fizz would be a good pickup. Also, something to consider is you have a really strong comp, but Zed really doesn't fit. Maybe because you have a really bad, like a really bad matchup for Zed or something in mid lane. It's totally fine to pick up a really safe mid laner just to play, and then like allow yourself to try to be carried, and then get some experience on that champion. Like Malzahar. Malzahar's a really safe mid laner that you can play. That's push and just farm. And maybe if you have a really rough lane matchup where you can't play that a certain champion, like you can't play Zed against a certain champion, then like you can pick a champion like Malzahar as a backup. It'd be fine. Next question. I haven't been successful in trying to find a secondary role as a jungle main. I'm good at CS, but usually end up losing lane. It's just going to take a lot of practice. That's a big problem with a lot of junglers in general. So I would typically suggest picking mid lane because it'll make it so you get jungle the most. And then just pick safe mages in mid lane and really learn that playstyle. It take time. If you name two of the best champions in all roles, what would they be? Okay, top lane. Kennen and right now in top lane I would say like in the current metagame, Kennen and Jace in top lane. Mid lane, Syndra and Orianna. Then support, Nami and Alistar. AD carry, I would say Ezreal and Caitlyn. I really like Jhin, but there's a lot of problems with Jhin in solo queue. I'm naming this off solo queue. And then jungle would definitely be, right now, Nidalee is just really strong. She takes a lot of skill, but she is by far, like, in terms of, really strong junglers, Nidalee's up there. I would pick Nidalee and Evelynn being the strongest junglers right now. Just in straight up solo queue, like raw power. Um, I would definitely put Elise like really next to Evelynn though. Like I actually no, I would put Elise above Evelynn. So Nidalee and Evelynn would be like, Nidalee and Elise would be like the best junglers in my opinion right now. I pretty much always ban Nidalee, just because like if a player really knows how to play Nidalee, it can really throw off a game. Would Fiora be worth picking up? It depends on how. Fiora is another champion that takes a lot of practice, but she's a really strong champion. So for sure, if you're willing to put a lot of time in and understand that if you're going to be playing Fiora in ranked, you may lose some games, and to master, Fiora is really good. What is your opinion in the current meta Zed? I'm surprised that he has been picked as mid lane to counter mages. Is it because meta has shifted to more of a top lane focus? Zed is really weak right now because of the nerfs he's received, and then general, like he loses a lot of matchups to mages with exhaust. As an example, I played against the Zed one trick the other day in Diamond 1, and I beat him with Lux. That's how depressing of Zed is. I destroyed him with Lux because I had exhaust. Like, if the player plays around Zed correctly right now, there's too much counterplay to Zed, which is crazy because they wanted to be like, okay, we want to give Zed countermatch, like counterplay. Okay, congratulations, they're counterplay now, right? But there's counterplay to everything. Zonius is cheaper. Exhaust is like better than ever right now in terms of running at mid against assassins. So assassins in general mid lane are really hurting right now. And until like the assassin rework comes in, I think assassins are going to remain in that position. So as Zed, like if you're playing against that kind of lane, you have to like adapt and like not even play aggressive and try to like the roam instead of killing the mage mid lane. What tips or tricks would you recommend trying to better minimap awareness? My awareness has gotten better with minimap, but occasionally I still just kind of forget to check the map. The only real like tip or trick I could suggest on this is increasing the size of the minimap. You can do that by going to your game settings. Other than that, it's just like get used to it. Like just keep looking at it. I've been playing MOBAs for like 9 years now, so I have like a really keen eye in general. Like my general like vision is just really good. Like even like when I'm not like playing League, like if something is like slightly outside of my vision range, like I'll notice it. It's kind of weird, but yeah, as an example, like when it's kind of like when I used to at my old place where I lived, I had a window right next to my PC, and it was really distracting because if anything moved in my window, my eyes would instantly move to it, and that's just like the crazy like I'm like, what's that? What's in my mini map, my window? Um, that's like kind of transitioned over. So yeah, just really becoming aware of it and really just understanding how much of a problem it causes is a real big deal. All right. So I'll give it another couple more minutes for any questions to come in, and then we'll close it out. Looks like the questions are slowing down though. All right. Looks like in general there's not many more questions coming in. So once again, guys, I appreciate you guys stopping by for the seminar. I'm going to be posting another seminar here pretty soon on law coaching, so feel free to check that out. To check, and sign up and show up next week. It's probably going to be around the same time. I may adapt the time to fit a little bit more better um, with everything. Now, um, final things. Once again, guys, if you missed the start of the seminar, there's a couple things. One, I have a community Discord that I am opening it up to non-students. Generally, it's for a productive area for people to learn and play with other players that want to improve. So if you want to join the Discord, what I'm going to do is I'm going to link my Discord information after the stream is over in the Twitch chat, and then you can add me on Discord, and then I'll invite you to the server. Um, Next thing, if you're interested in getting free coaching, check out the seminar page on Law Coaching, where my seminar was hosted and the information was at. You can go through a survey link and possibly get free coaching. I'm picking 2 people a month to get that. And now the final thing is, if you guys enjoyed this seminar, want to rewatch it or whatever, it's going to be uploaded on my YouTube channel, so feel free to check that out. Feel free to subscribe to my Twitter. In terms of when my streams and my seminars are going to be hosted, I'll typically be getting that information out there. And of course, follow the stream. Thanks, guys.